everyone. My name is Amy Christensen. I'm the founder of Sauna Jardin, a socially conscious luxury fragrance house. We thank you all for coming. I purposely don't look at the screen, so I don't know who's behind the computer right now, but thank you for joining. And many of you may know that we launched Cosmic Hour a few weeks ago to really talk about issues that affect our community and to help people connect with source and really come to be the highest version of themselves. And so from my perspective, I've been engaged in, I guess, a journey of personal growth and evolution for many years, and the last 15 years very interested in energy work and transformational healing modalities. And so Cosmic Hour is an opportunity for me to open up my little kind of golden Rolodex of all of the people who have really helped me along the way and helped me to become a better version of myself, and who've really illuminated a path for me. And Fiona Arrigo is one of the key people in that journey. And I feel so very honored to be able to chat with Fiona tonight. It's hard to describe Fiona. If you know Fiona, you'll know it's hard to describe her. And I think that the words that come to mind are legendary, wise, iconic, an oracle in many ways. And she has guided a lot of people through retreats that she runs through the Arrigo program and A Place to Heal, and in one-on-one sessions. And she and I found each other. I found her through serendipitous good fortune, and she truly changed my life and has changed the course of my life and has enabled me to evolve and follow a path that I didn't know was possible. So Fiona is, she's an intuitive healer, she's a life teacher, and she's a mentor. She's a psychotherapist and a fellow of the Institute of Biodynamic Medicine, and she's a senior licensed biodynamic therapist and biodynamic medicine practitioner. She, in these times of great change, a lot of people, I think, have sought Fiona out because she offers very healing support, guidance, advice, and understanding of oneself as it relates to the changing world around us. And one of the topics that Fiona and I have spent many years talking about is the divine feminine. So that's what we'll be exploring tonight. That will be the second question that she answers, and this will be an interview format between Fiona and I, and it will be about 1 hour. And if people have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer them. And so I will hand it over to Fiona now. And my question to you, Fiona, is if you want to introduce yourself a little bit and talk about your work in your own words.
Okay. So, Amy, sweetheart, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's true, we have many years together, and it's a deep honor, to work with you and work with so many people. And I think always when I hear things about me, I think my first quality of energy is humble. I just feel humble in this journey, and I can see some of my crew, my friends here. So hello, Debbie Ann, and hello, Lucy and Jade, and hello, and everybody that's taking the time to turn up, tonight in our busy lives. So I've been working for, I think, about 40 years. I'm just in the middle. I've started a retreat tonight for 10 women, and I was just talking a little bit about my work so I can remember things to tell you. But the truth is I have been working for 40 odd years, and it's taken many different shapes, and now suitable to my age. I would think that I am now much more a mentor and a healer. I have my psychotherapeutic background, but really what I love to share is the heart, new ways of being, new ways of understanding, leading a compassionate path, and helping us really come together, because I know that the medicine for our future is related to what we're going to talk about tonight, the divine feminine. But for me, you know, aspects of this is coming together, learning to care. We can only do this as one, and that means that we really need to understand ourselves in whole new ways of what's going on in the world. So I'm the founder of the Arrigo program that runs one-to-one retreats, the founder of A Place to Heal that works with a whole cacophony of really amazing healers and therapists, Lucine being one of them, astonishing work. And we do one-to-one retreats, we do group retreats, we do personal sessions. I run a community for women called New Codes for Living. I was holding something called Sunday Sanctuary through COVID. So really, it's about service. So where the work calls, I like to go. So it's about service.
Oh, Fiona, and the world is a better place because you were born. Thank you so much for your service and your light, and your humility. So for me, the fundamental question, I think that you were the first person to introduce me to the term, the divine feminine, many years ago. And now I hear that and I say that word. But I would love to hear from you what the divine feminine means to you.
Yeah. Well, again, of course, she has so many different aspects, but if we're going to keep this simple, the divine feminine is the great mother. She is the great creatrix. She is the other side of God, great mother, the same thing. She brings the feminine aspect. She is also created to the mother of our earth. And she is here at this time because in all sorts of different understandings, the relationship between the divine feminine, the relationship between our earth and the feminine was interrupted and abrupted. And for us to go through these new times, we need to come into this understanding of primarily bringing balance, which is also love, healing and expansion and inclusiveness and other qualities that we'll talk about, I'm sure, through this conversation. But we at this moment, this coming of her in her might, in this expansion of love,
Mm-hmm.
and this also this understanding of how we move in these times between expansion and contraction. And she comes really for these times that we are in, as we all know, a great revolution, a great evolution, and many great things that are coming and are here. But we are also in a great cycle of crisis, not beyond repair. But we are looking in this cycle of great imbalance that for so long has been governed by the masculine energy, that has kind of outdated itself. I never want to say that anything was wrong, but we've come through a very long road where we are now seeking balance to all the old ways that were about divide, conquer, exclusiveness, money, power, oppression, war, great inequality.
Mm.
And the great mother, the divine feminine, the wisdom, won't stand for that. We are all one people. We are all one earth. We are all plants and animals and four-legged and oceans. And the great mother, the divine feminine, brings us into relationship, into right relationship with all these elements, where we come into a life that has love, what comes into a life that has wisdom, that comes into a life that has expansion and purpose. Whereas the old model, which we're weaving out of, is about us being split and isolated and indeed controlled. And so the old masculine ways are loosening its hold. It's not eventually in the story, we will learn to have that perfect balance of masculine and feminine. But for now, there's much more focus into the feminine, because she is the great regulator. She is the great teacher. And she brings back, the world that has been numbed down, and we've lost our connection. And through her and through this new way, we are healing the rupture of our inner connection. And again, Amy, our old world was based on materialism and consumerism, which brought about divisiveness, and this can't be the way anymore. So she, the feminine, brings back the balance of care, of unity, all this beautiful work that you do, and your philosophy of, I was reading something about you the other day, and you said something about the way that you work the circle of economy. I can't remember your words. It's so right. I mean, you're a very good representative of bringing balance and care and working together and abundance and community and cooperation. This wasn't in the masculine world. The masculine world was one of divisiveness and hoarding and control and being better and instilling fear. And, in these new ways heralded by the divine feminine, we're learning to fear less. It's not about fearlessness. We're learning to fear less. So all this comes through the feminine and our creativity and switching. This is a beautiful saying, which you'll often hear me using, which Caroline Myss uses, where she says, right now we're switching from the love of power, masculine, to the power of love, feminine.
Ooh.
And again, with Einstein, he was such a genius. And he talked about, in order to solve the problem, we have to raise our consciousness. And it's through the feminine, the divine feminine, the feminine, that this way of doing it differently, of remapping, retelling a new story, reimagining a new world. All this comes from feminine possibility, expansion, and purpose. And we are learning to care for each other. This comes from the Great Mother. The indigenous people say we are all one relation. And this new leadership, which is part of the feminine, is really helping people to awaken to themselves, to become whole in themselves. And from that place, this is good leadership to support this, rather than saying you're good or you're bad or you haven't passed your exams or go to the, we're filled with not being seen, not being mirrored, not being heard, not being understood, not being, it's a cycle that hasn't done us a lot of favors. So this is all connected to the divine feminine. She brings the other side of God. She brings the other side of God is in charge of us, into the expansiveness that we are all together. And she brings love, compassion. She's also fierce. She's a strong teacher. But she's here in this first setting to help equalize the waters and to bring the waters into balance. And this is why so many of us are waking up to nature and our sensuality and our beauty, not in a faux way, which we may talk about later, but in this very authentic reclaiming of our naturalness, which is related to our instinctual self and our intuitive self.
In your work in the last 40 years, do you see, I'm sure you see this great awakening and people starting to honor and tap into their individual divine feminine and a collective respect for the universal divine feminine. So are you able to talk a little bit about how you've seen that unfold in your practice in the last 40 years? I mean, you've had this great vantage point, Fiona, where you were probably looking at life from this perspective decades before many of us even knew what the term was. So I don't know, I'm just curious. I know that it's not on our list of questions, but I'm just curious. Yeah, okay. I'm curious if you see people, like I feel like I see people just lighting up all over the world, and I see women or men, who are connected to their feminine energy, just like light bulbs all over the globe, part of this collective consciousness. So do you have what's your experience?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is the time of the great awakening and reset, and everybody's saying, everybody's got a story about how they want to do it differently and how their individual lives affect the whole. We are looking from a much more holistic model, whereas people are concerned about the world. Look at your business. Entrepreneurs are coming forth saying it has to be done differently. There's a huge, massive rising of consciousness and awareness that has quickened and quickened and quickened through, when I began, it was much more, a kind of much more studied, quieter, a quieter sharing. Whereas now, most places that we go, we will have some form of intercommunication because we're being moved by something asking us for a different way to be. So absolutely, we're waking up all over the place. Absolutely. And people are saying no. And, the great voice, which we're standing up, where be it Black Lives Matter or any of these amazing movements where the collective is saying no more. We won't stand for inequality anymore. We won't stand to see our children hurt or somebody not having food. This is the impulse of the Great Mother. This is the impulse of the divine feminine. We can't ignore what we've done. And it's time for, in my work, our individual lives to contribute, just not to be like, oh, it's not happening and it doesn't matter. We're in this age, we're coming out of the age of information, we're going into the age of consciousness, and we can't ignore anything anymore. And the other thing that's really important is that what I talk about a lot is we come into a field of coherence. So this means this consciousness, this waking up. You can't do anymore, what you did with the left hand, the right hand's never going to find out. You can't, we're not able to hide. And the shadows of all the work that we're working with all the time, of the shadowlands and the ancestral loops and all the things we get to work with to clear out, primarily so we can become lighter, not so baggaged. And then we can begin, one of my many songs is, how do our personal lives affect the whole? How do I become an inner activist. My life and all the women that I'm lucky enough to work with, Debbie Ann being one of them, you know, it's how do we really get this worthiness that our lives matter? What we think, what we dream, what we speak, what we say, how we relate, how we dress, what we buy, what we waste. This is the time of consciousness. And all this, I believe, is feminine driven for now. It's not disincluding the mighty, amazing work of the masculine. It's not doing this, but we need this rebalance.
So would you say that when humanity was created, or the cosmos were created, that the masculine and the feminine were in balance?
Gosh, you know, I'm, you know, no. I just feel I'm such a student of life, and to answer that question, I don't think I'm able to. But I think at the beginning of time, yes, there was a union. Because we are ultimately masculine and feminine, like we're stardust and silica, we're connected of so many different qualities. But in order to come in and experience these dimensions, there is a split between this.
Into the age of consciousness.
Yeah.
So I remember my son and I, a couple of years ago, went to Luxor, and we're doing volunteer work, and we had the opportunity to tour some of the temples there. And one of the things that I learned that I will remember always is there was written on the walls from the ancient Egyptians, they had a scale, and it was to, when someone passed away, they would weigh their heart, and if their heart was as light as a feather, they were able to go to the afterlife. And it reminds me of what you're saying with this.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite. That was actually what my first teacher brought me as a teaching. That, you know, many moons ago, and it was that exactly. Let the heart be as light as a feather, so that we can pass through. But unfortunately, you know, the bravery and the courage of our individual lives is we come with the burdens, we come with the sorrows, we come with the unhappiness. And so a lot of the work is this unveiling, this aligning to the lightness of our heart, the mighty heart. You know, we are learning to become heart-based creatures on this planet. This is what we're learning. This is, if we're going to survive, if we move through into these next layers of these incredible opportunities that have been written in so many books of mysticism, you know, we can evolve and we can transfigure and come into a different way of being. But right now we're really in it. You know, the Vedas talk about us being at the edge of the Kali Yuga, which is goes on and on and on and on and on, by the way. It's not like a quickie, but this is like the refining of ourselves, of this quality of being that has, and also an empowerment, because here we are privileged in the West to be able to have these conversations. We're so aware that so many women can't have these conversations throughout the world. And so for this, we also do the work for all the women that don't have voices, because we have to call for a change in our world.
It gives me so much hope and happiness, Fiona, to know it feels like there's an answer, and it feels like being able to operate and function, and as you would say, drop into, you know, our heart space. I'm relieved to know that there's a path forward, and although oftentimes it's easier said than done, I feel like there's a script for how we should move forward. So I want to ask you about something else that you and I have spoken about a lot over the years, and yet I never feel like I know kind of, I'd love to learn more. So you talk about archetypes in your work a lot, and I'd love to know what you believe are the leaders for now as an archetype of feminine wisdom.
Yeah, beautiful question, actually. Thank you. So archetypes, Jung talked a lot about archetypes. Basically, in my understanding, archetypes are a concentration, like a cluster of energy, of information that exists in our consciousness in a way as states of possibility and representations. And through our history, our the archetypes have really dominated the collective imagination, so often represented as heroes and heroines, and through myths and stories and books and media and magazines, and harnessing under a lot of influence. We're being influenced all the time, even though we may not think we are, but we are often influenced by these archetypal beliefs, these collective stories. And in a way, we could say with loving compassion that the old archetype of the male dominating culture has outrun its useful list. It's not working so well. So we're looking at archetypes and how they influence our narrative as we rewrite I say we rewrite her story. We rewrite and call in a different quality of being for our collective imagining. And the old hero was, or the old archetypes were based around heroic actions, dominance, conquering. The old gods, if you're good, you will get. You're entitled to have. If you follow and do as you're told and do all this. If you look at the way that we were brought up in fairy stories, they had a lot of that kind of mystery of dominance and heroic actions and happy ever after and all these things. But now we're seeing, in a way, as we learn to take self-responsibility, that there isn't any happy ever after, that we're coming out of the era of being rescued by the hero and coming into finding our own empowerment and, in a way, turning in and rescuing ourselves. So there are themes, of many, many, many themes, but we could say motherhood, mothering our earth, mothering each other, reclaiming power through self-esteem is a new narrative. Connecting through nature, connecting in right relationship, not faux beauty, faux news, falseness, pretense, but the naturalness of wisdom and art and culture and music. Big one for women to connect to our sensuality rather than becoming sexualized, so that we can feel this natural connection to the beauty of nature. The healer is a big archetype. Caring for our world, as we say in the indigenous culture, we are all one relation. And we're in through these new narratives of like motherhood, who connects us into our intuition, our nurturing, tenderness. And how do we lead in a way? These are all questions of how do we lead in a new way through the energy of mother, beauty, intuition, nurturing, and tenderness, along with power and self-esteem. In the old days, it could be, I don't know what, Catherine the Great or Durga, or these strong women that dominate and get the job done, and the kind of 70s archetype of working girl multitasker that was so exhausted and working under the masculine template. But today we're learning in this new archetype of, what true empowerment is, that comes from self-esteem, where we're not feeling inferior, but equally we're not feeling superior to anyone else. There's this equality that comes from presence, grace, generosity, courtesy, respect, good manners. These are all, in a way, aspects of the divine feminine's relationship to personal power.
And it seems like it all stems from, I think it was you who many years ago introduced me to, oh my gosh, what is his name? The kooky astrologer. Why am I'm blanking his name? Do you remember his?
John Wadsworth?
No.
Oh, Carpaccio.
Yes, Kepacha.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love about Kepacha is that he often says, in Lakesh.
Yes.
Yes, and so I am you, you are another me. And it feels like that grace and that dignity and that softness ultimately stems from that understanding, like you were saying, that we are all woven from the same cloth. We're all united as one. So how does,
and it's also, can I just say, because within the softness, I'm sure everybody knows here, is strength. You know, the softness and the tenderness is powerful because it's the reclaiming where we know ourselves. And, you know, when you're with a woman or a man who knows themselves, there's no argument. There's nothing to prove because we've collected through each other's mirrors the broken off self. So we can see the bits that we've stopped connecting to in ourselves. And through this gentleness is this reclaiming of our power, of our substance, because we're able to look into the mirror and know ourselves. And when we know ourselves, we can't possibly judge or criticize or poison or gossip or hurt or want to devalue somebody else's life, because we see ourselves in all the fabrics of it. You know, in this incredible human psyche, of which, I don't know, there's 300 odd parts. And we're sinners and saints and temptresses and mothers and generous and ungenerous and manipulative. We have to be able to come to terms with all the facets of self in this understanding of compassionate acceptance and forgiveness. And then I can look through you to see you as another part of myself. This is feminine, to be able to travel through each other. We're not held back in this judging, criticizing, gossiping, competitive, somebody's better than me energy.
Feeling of separation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Amy, exactly.
So why do you think, Fiona, on a kind of a little bit more practical level, I find in my life, I know so many women who have struggled enormously the last 10 years. And yet at the same time, I also see them very much coming into whatever them, expressing the essence of themselves in a more liberated way. And I would imagine that I'm sure you see that too. So why does it have to be so painful? Why does this unveiling and unlocking and revealing of the divine feminine, why does it come with so much struggle? Sorry to ask you if, I mean, this wasn't on the list, but it's like, but
I said we could go off grid, darling heart. So, you know, the pain from my work is in the rupture of the disconnection of self. And when we're disconnected through whatever conditioning process, family, school, love affairs, work, whatever, we close down and we contract. And in that closing down and contraction, this other self starts to develop, where we have a self that is protected, a self that is armored. And when you start to crack that mirror, we have to feel again. The thing is that we've been cut off from our feelings. Our feelings are not necessarily deeply emotional, by the way. I find the more we feel, in a way, it's just being connected. But the stages of pain is to the reunion grief of where we have been ruptured from our connection, which is a longing, it's a belonging, it's a birthright. And we don't always get it. And so the false self, or the egoic self, creates a wonderful dance, a great battle. And many times for many of us, we have to die. We die to the ego. We die, and it's painful because the ego has brought us to a place to protect us in a way. And then there comes a moment when it's not working for us. And so it cracks. And through the crack, you may feel that you felt alone all your life, or not pretty enough, or not good enough, or not strong enough, or whatever enough we're not. And that feeling, that piercing, hurts. And it's a process of reconnection. I think I said earlier, and if I didn't, I'm going to say it now, it's this reunion grief as we come back to ourselves. The first stage can be painful because it's separation. Does that answer it or not?
Well, anytime I hear your voice, it answers a question and makes me feel better. So it does. The way I'm understanding what you're saying is that it's really, what I'm understanding is it's the original separation that was painful.
Yeah, exactly. It's the original sin. It's the original sin of forgetting, where we thought we were great, where we entered into barter, where we sold our souls for gold, where we enslaved people and trudged them through the world and felt something was okay to put mothers and children and husbands up on places where they could be bought, where we have hurt people and whipped people, where we have gone to war because of power issues, where we have gone through genocides, where we have behaved atrociously in the name of we can do it. So I think when each and every one of us turns up to do the work, we are unwinding something, as you said, an original separation, an original sin. And it's momentarily painful because most of us don't feel great about ourselves, because our self-esteem has been wiped out, because we haven't been informed. And as far as I'm concerned, we've been told a false story of what is true. And it's not true. All the stories that have been shooting around, or whatever it is, one day my prince will come and I'll get a fast car and I'll live happily ever after. I mean, excuse me, it may work for half an hour. The stories are not stories that bring you, this is why I talk about archetypes, that bring you into wholesomeness. They're not wholesome. They don't support your soul. They don't support your spirit. And I'm also not, by the way, I've had as much fun as everybody on this planet. I'm not, talking about Mrs. Straitjacket here, because we're here to have fun and enjoy, but we're unwinding a story, Amy.
And I suppose so then we could think that the pain is temporary until we open up our heart and we really do feel that deep connection and we evolve in consciousness.
Absolutely. And I think for everybody here, we know moments you've either seen your therapist, or you've had a healing, or you've swum in the ocean or something, where you feel connected back to yourself. And this is the rethreading more rethreading we do, eventually the triggers don't come. Eventually we're not moved all over the chessboard, because this reclaiming, it becomes anchored in the self.
So how does, on that note, how would you, what advice would you give to men or women to try and become more in touch with their divine feminine?
I would say stop, pause, listen, quieten down, and find your own rhythm. Don't follow the rhythm of the world that manufactures, which now, in a way, COVID is changing so much. But, you know, that rhythm of, you know, I don't know if there's anybody on this call, you know, city women that have to get up at 6 in the morning and finish at 9 or 10 at night. If you are in some place where you are dishonoring yourself, your needs to rest, your need to feel, your need to experience, your need to work it out for yourself. Because I don't want this to sound like a cliche, but my 40 years allows me to say that everybody has the answers within. Everybody does. But if we're busy doing, rushing, stressing, and living in this world that I now have to refer as faux, where we are inundated, which is why I had to crawl to the forest myself last week and just sit there. And I'm not like the most practical person. I mean, when I told my kids I was going to the forest, they were hysterical.
Right.
And when I arrived and the man gave me a map and said, find your way to the camp, I mean, I froze. And all the way to the camp, I was crying because my coordinates, my instinctual self, the bottom line is I got there, and I got there in really good time. But the moments of self-doubt, and I wouldn't be able to find my way through. And, you know, it's like, you and I often say this, I'm much more right brain than left brain. And so my logical thinking, rational, doesn't practical.
Practical.
I needed that for this forest walk. Really getting to the forest. Getting to the forest was so I could come out of my mind. Problem is that we are losing our minds. Look at the behavior. Look at the social behavior. We have lost our minds. If we'd had great mothers that allowed us to rest and gave us more space and allowed us to trust our intuition and our gut, and to come to this rather than this manufactured Western mental body that we live in all the time, you know, trying to find answers from the neck up. And that's not where it is. The answers, as you've just said, are in the heart, and they're in the nervous system. So we have to recalibrate. We have to, I mean, in Tibetan Buddhism, we talk a lot about spaciousness and emptiness. You know, to empty all this stuff, clean out, because we're exhausted. Even if we're not active, unless we're sitting somewhere rich in nature and drinking really good water and eating really good food that literally comes out of your garden and you eat, we've got a lot of rebirthing to do so we can reclaim this naturalness.
Well, I love the image, Fiona, of you in the forest and your beautiful children giggling, because I know that you and I both are not always the most practical people.
At all. But I did 3 days. I was there on the sheepskin, eating from the kettle, but more than anything, just looking at the oak and the beach and the moss, and really, really getting how mighty nature is.
So talk to me about that, please, and how you feel that Mother Nature can help create this connection that we're all yearning for and being called to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, when we first went into COVID, and I don't know if you all agree, but for me, the first 4 months of COVID was like a massive planetary initiation.
Mm-hmm.
As suddenly together we experienced a quietness, the world stopped, nature bloomed, and we all somehow wanted to help each other. There was this kind of renaissance on the internet where everybody was giving free courses and supporting, loving each other and helping. And I think this is very much part of, and I said at that time that I felt we'd been put in Mother Nature's waiting room to reflect. And so, as far as I know, as I deepen into my own studies, the waters of the planet are our bodies, the trees and all the minerals and everything is who we are. The problem is we've become so westernized. I mean, I know lots of you probably hike and have probably really great relationships with nature, but we have to kind of come into this new relationship where we understand we have to take care of her. Mother Nature, she isn't the great mother. She is part, the divine mother, the divine feminine is part of Pachamama, Mother Earth, and all, as Lucine would talk about, her holy children. Or it's like we have to kind of come back into the sacredness that we are walking on her. We are breathing with her. There's this incredible rhythm. If we stop, as we breathe out, the plants breathe in. As we breathe in, the plants breathe out. And all this innate intelligence that she's there, of her community, of her roots, of how she looks after the other trees. There's the fungi and the moss and the little slugs and actually, in truth, we're 10% human. The rest of it is microbiomes and bacteria and everything. So we are nature nurture, but it's kind of coming into that reverence. We've been so arrogant. The bloodlines. I mean, my family of origin, my God, it's been, 30 years of chipping away at this entitled arrogance. Because we're arrogant, we don't look up at the sky, we don't look down at the earth, we don't pay attention because we're so busy and we're so stressed and we're moving so fast. And therefore we're disconnected, and then we can only rely on this little thing called brain that's exhausted and depleted and unrested and alone and terrified because we're out of communication, we're out of community.
I went a couple of weeks ago with a woman who Pulver's apothecary.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and so she led a pilgrimage on the summer solstice from the beginning of the River Avon to Stonehenge. And when you speak about nature and that breathing in and the breathing out and that true how interconnected it is and how important it is to be still and receive this wisdom. And again, when I hear you talk about the divine feminine and receiving the knowledge, and she said something to me that I will never forget. And so we went to the base of the river at the beginning of the River Avon, and she spoke about how all the water on the planet has been here since the beginning of planet Earth. It hasn't increased, it hasn't decreased, it's just recycled. And we put our fingers then in the base of the River Avon and really reflected on how ancestors have experienced that water and all of the knowledge that the water has, and that when we put our fingers into the water, it really is a literal ripple in time. And it was so, it struck me, and I am intrigued to hear, you know, what some of maybe your learnings were as this woman who is such a wise woman. What did you, were there any kind of, and I guess I'm getting back to thoughts now and I'm back to here, but, or feelings, I mean, were there any feelings that struck you when you were with the moss and the trees and in this wild space? And I remember you recommending the book, is it Wild Woman? Yeah, so do you mind talking a little bit?
it was, yes, absolutely. It was when I allowed myself to stop and sit by the fire. So the fire is a very big quality for me. So as I sat at the fire and I listened rather than thought, and how I really entered into this quality of what I call divine humility. I was able to see my insignificance, but also my significance. And let her speak just like a mama would. Let her roots interface with my nervous system. Let her, as I went to sleep at night, lullaby me with the wind. Let me smell her. Let me feel. I drank a lot of oak. I was stewing up a storm. I got quite high one night on oak tincture. Strongly recommended. It was like an incredible Chardonnay. It was like, oh my God. And drank lots of oak leaves. And just again, it's about also the coming back, as we come into the Aquarian age. The Aquarian age is also part of reclaiming ritual and ceremony, which again, in our manufactured Mary Quant zipped up outfits with boots and, you know, sterilized domesticated living, as we come back and reclaim this ceremonial, you know, organization and order, whether that's lighting a candle, it could be as simple as that, but it's coming back into this thread of reverence and respect and sacredness. Those are the passports to our future selves. And it doesn't mean that we're going around like, you know, some holy being 24/7, because we have to learn to dance between expansion, love, and contraction. Saturn and Uranus, this dance that we're under astrologically. So this is what we're going through as we, and an expansion takes us into the field, and the field is love. So the cliche is there's actually nothing you have to do. You don't have to do anything. It's what you said earlier. It's about a receiving and a stopping and being in awe of being worthy enough even to notice. I mean, I'm just looking outside the window now, and there's huge oak trees all the way around me with the sky and the light. And, you know, I'm no poet, but I feel that real energy of appreciation. And that we look to her rather than Vogue. Or we look to her because all this boxed in frequency that we've lived in for years and years and years and years, where we, you know, and now it's extreme. We have Wi-Fi running through our homes. We have electricity running through our homes. We have computers, we have mobiles. Most people, as much as we all say don't do it, we do it. You know, everything is, we're being fried. So it's hard to go out and say, good morning, nature. But that's what we need to do. We need to come away from this small boxed in self and put it down when we can. Walk in nature, walk barefoot as much as you can. As much as you can, let the walking on the earth be our medicine, because that amazing realignment starts to happen, just like Denise showed you. You put with consciousness, with awareness, you put your finger in the water, and that's medicine. She's feeding you your DNA. Everything is connected to this original blueprint. It's just we're boxed in to something that takes us further and further away. So it's this returning.
As always, Fiona, it is poetry that comes out of your mouth. And I know we have a few minutes left, and I feel like you always have this poetic dance, and everything is so perfectly aligned, because you said 3 words that I really want to focus on as we start to close this session. And I'm so grateful to hear the term from you, divine humility, because that really feels like the way forward. And as you said in the beginning, that you are humble, and it just feels right to sink into that, and to feel safe with another word that I want to reflect on. The 3rd word is expansion, and that that sort of like universal heartbeat that we're all connected to. And it feels so right, and it's such a beautiful compass for how we should all be living.
And we've got time, none of this it's being done through us. And Amy, it's happening. We've just got to be quiet and notice and surrender this self-righteousness that we've come through this last century with, this know-it-all energy. We're going to get nowhere now. I often say this is the age of conversation. We have to make it up together. We need flexibility. We need spontaneity. These are the new codes, so that we don't get, because we need that resilience to keep changing. So, and we do, in a way, we have all the time in the world to get this, if we start to make the first footsteps towards this, that we don't have the answers, and yet there's no need to be scared. We're working it out together. I have enormous faith in our humanness, and I absolutely know that we are so capable of greatness. It's just, how do we encourage each other to step up and into our greatness, and not want to pull each other down or keep each other small, but to encourage, and this is what you do in your work so beautifully, is to encourage us to step up into our greatness and possibility. And the Great Mother loves that, because you're taking care. You're taking care of the earth. We're taking care of our people. Supposed to be doing this. This is the archetype of the mother. You don't have to be a mother to do this. Take care of our earth and our people, and she smiles.
Every time I'm with you, Fiona, I feel like I'm in this forest with fairies and deer and butterflies and animals and all of this magic, all of this mossy green kind of celestial magic. So thank you so much, Fiona, for taking us all on this journey with you, and reminding us to be still and to lead from our hearts, and to have faith, and to go on the path of divine humility.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. You are always just an oracle and a guiding ray of light for so many. I love you to bits and pieces. Thank you so much, Fiona. And thank you to everyone who came tonight.